Good evening. This is Wednesday, October 26, 2022, Committee of the Whole Board of Education meeting here in District 205 Center. I'll call the meeting to order. It's 5:35, and if I could please have the roll called.
Mrs. Hassler?
Here.
Mrs. Arvanitis?
Here.
Mrs. Troutman?
Here.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Attending remotely.
Mr. Collins?
Yep.
Mrs. Stufen?
Present.
And Mrs. Caforio?
Here. So we have 6 board members here in the room, and we have Mr. Kaczynski attending remotely. So at this time, if we could stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so the Committee of the Whole, as we've sort of spoken to a bit in prior meetings, is an opportunity for us to dig into one topic, which tonight is going to be IAR and SAT data. It's an opportunity for us to really have a deep discussion. And so there's going to first be a presentation, followed by some small group discussion, and then a full group discussion at the end. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Campbell, who's going to begin, and let the administration facilitate. So, Dr. Campbell.
Thank you. The last 2 years has certainly had its impact on students as well as staff all over the world. And we know that every student was vulnerable to the disruptions caused by the pandemic. Tonight, however, we will focus on the results from the state and national assessments and review them within the consideration of the ISB School Summative Designation Ratings. The important work that we will be doing together tonight will allow us to review and discuss these assessments and provide an opportunity to then develop tools to help continue to guide us and formulate as we make adjustments to school improvement plans, as well as begin to implement and monitor our strategic priorities and objectives. I continue to be proud of District 205 team and their constant focus on student success. However, we know that our journey continues and we are not done educating, engaging, and empowering all students. We still have more work to do. The information that we will be reviewing tonight will be released publicly by ISB tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So at this time, I'm going to ask my colleagues, Dr. Grins and Dr. Rubenstein, to proceed in taking and walking us through the state and national assessment.
While they get set up, just an aside, there were no one signed up for public comments, so I did not forget. I just did not say that there was no one signed up. So we are able to move on to reports and presentations. All right, Dr. Rubenstein.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dr. Kevin Rubenstein, Assistant Superintendent for Student Services. We are pleased and excited to bring you the results from our state and national assessments in our first Committee of the Whole meeting this evening tonight. So just to help people recall where we've been, back on September 27th, Dr. Grens and some of our other colleagues talked about the professional learning work that we've done that helped to align the work that we are doing with regard to our internal district assessments and what we've already done there back on October 18th, which was just a week ago. Tonight, we're really going to be focusing on the results from state and national assessments and focus on our school improvement planning processes. At our next board meeting in November, we'll talk about growth. We'll make some comparisons to other school districts. We'll talk about the indicators, and we'll also ask the board to approve school report cards, which is something that the school district is required to do. And in the winter, at some point, we will talk about the results from district assessments, and our work, as Dr. Campbell talked about earlier, is ongoing. So as we get into this, all of the work that we are doing is closely aligned to our student journey of excellence. And as you will recall, when we talked about this earlier, and you will see those 3 banners up there in the room, our mission is really closely aligned to the idea that we would like all students to be educated, engaged, and empowered. The way that we do that is through our district values. And those are a series of statements regarding how we want to actually implement that vision statement. So we want our students to communicate effectively, think critically and analytically, collaborate and problem solve, and certainly contribute meaningfully to community and society. Those go on into the area of empowerment. And that hopefully we know will accomplish our vision statement, which is that all students are ready for college, career, and life. And so those are supported by our 4 strategic objectives, our priorities and strategies here, which are related to student success, the learning environment, financial and operational effectiveness, and then community and engagement, communications and community engagement. So we are primarily going to focus this evening on student success and the learning environment, and you'll see why in just a second. So as we look at the Journey of Excellence and the Illinois Summative Designation categories and weights, you can see that they are actually really closely aligned. The strategic priority 1 is related to student success. Those are things in the Illinois Summative Designation that include things like English language arts growth, math growth, high school graduation rate, English language arts proficiency, math proficiency, science proficiency, and English learner progress to proficiency. You'll hear more about that in just a little bit. And then strategic priority 2 is the learning environment. And that has to do with chronic absenteeism and climate surveys and the 9th graders on track to graduate. The thing that I would like for you to take away here is that the top bucket there, for those of you who are doing your math very, very quickly, that strategic priority 1 can never add up to more than 75%. So for example, some of our schools don't have an English learner progress to proficiency score in their overall reports. So the rest of the measures are overweighted. So math proficiency might be overweighted a little bit. Their growth scores might be overweighted a little bit. And so you'll see that as we talk about those in the next part of the presentation. Additionally, obviously, our elementary and middle schools would not have a high school graduation rate. And so 50% of the elementary and middle school scores are not going to be based on high school graduation rate. 50% of their scores are going to be based on math and ELA growth. Similarly, at the bottom, those scores can never be based on more than 25% of the score. So chronic absenteeism, climate survey, those are usually the bulk of the score for our elementary and middle schools. But at the high school, it's a little bit offset by the 9th graders on track to graduate measure, coming in at 8.33% of the overall score. So those add up obviously to 100%. Again, you'll see in just a little while how those all come together. So just a little bit of a historical perspective. We thought that this was important to bring together for people to talk about how things have changed since 2004, because this is something that I often lose track of. And as we are going through this, so much has changed over time. So from 2004 to 2017 were the years of implementation of No Child Left Behind. There were a lot of assessments that were implemented at this time. So ACT was in, we saw the implementation of PARCC and the Illinois Standards Achievements Test. They were primarily focused on proficiency. In those days, there were lower achievement and cut scores and benchmarks. So the scores for our district may have looked actually a little bit higher because that was how things were going. Additionally, schools some schools were given designations, but there was an overall district designation given to every single school district. So you were either a passing district or a failing school district. And those were the designations back in the day. Then in 2018 and 2019, the federal government passed to the states the Every Student Succeeds Act, the ESSA. And so those were the school designations that were given. And so you'll see those again in just a second. Weighted scores, which are really heavily focused on student growth. Very, very different, and took away the heavy focus on achievement, and also required schools and districts and the state to focus on things other than the academic indicators there. Those were the things that brought in things like chronic absenteeism and the climate survey and those pieces there. We also ushered in an era of higher benchmarks. And so for those of you who are tracking our scores, you saw that some of the scores took a little bit of a dip there. In 2020 and 2021, those were the waiver years. And so during the pandemic, students were taking assessments, but there were no formal designations posted. And so since 2019, we have actually not received a formal designation from the state. And we haven't received these formal scores. And here we are in 2022. We're back at full implementation of ESSA and the return of summative designations. So that's just a little bit of history that we thought was important for context. So there are some long-term goals for the Illinois ESSA plan that we wanted to point out, because these are important as people are looking at where we are going to be. That the state has set goals that they want 90% or more of third grade students to be reading at or above grade level, 90% or more of fifth grade students to meet or exceed expectations in math, 90% or more of ninth grade students on track to graduate with their cohort, and 90% or more of students to graduate from high school ready for college and career. You will notice, again, that many of these are closely aligned to our own journey of excellence. You will also recognize the fact that many of these are very lofty goals. And so we have a responsibility as a school district to make sure that we are always measuring ourselves higher and against much further benchmarks than just these Illinois ESSA plan goals. So as we get into this, and Dr. Grenz is going to take us into the first part, it's a really complicated process. And we're going to try and simplify that process for you to talk about how we get to the summative designations. So the summative designations are determined in a really exciting process, but all schools are given time to review and verify their data. So beginning back in June, we received preliminary score reports on all of our data and benchmarks. So everything related to SAT, Illinois Assessment of Readiness, access scores, Illinois Science Assessment, the 5 essentials, all of our chronic absenteeism, freshmen on track, and graduation rate. I say that it's not in a clean format. It often comes in individual student scores. We can see a preliminary score. It's also embargoed, so we are not able to share it, but we can start to use it for preliminary student planning and for school improvement planning. And that's exactly what we've done. The other piece of this is that as late as October 14th of this year, the State Board of Education sent a message to all schools across the state and said, please re-verify all of your attendance data for the 21-22 school year to make sure that it is accurate. We've received word that some of your attendance data may not be accurate and it is impacting your scores. So we, as late as 2 weeks ago, we were receiving word that some of this data needed to be re-verified. So there's a lot of work in this step one of this process. This is a lot of work going on behind the scenes, but this is a lot of planning that goes into this. At that same time, growth scores are determined for elementary and middle schools. And the growth score process is an interesting one. So really what happens here is that they take an individual student score for an individual student in 4th grade. They predict where that student is going to be in 5th grade. And then they take that student score in 5th grade and they compare where they where that student actually is. And the difference between those two is that student's growth score. They then make a conglomeration of all of those scores to have, they can have a class score then, a class growth score, and a grade level growth score, and a cohort group growth score, and a school growth score. And that is exactly what they've done. So similarly, if no score existed from last year for a student, then that student isn't included in the growth score calculations. That's just the way that it works. So we thought that it was important to just point that out. So as we get into those, to that step one, Dr. Grenz is going to talk a little bit here about the performance just of our D205 students on these assessments. And as he does that, I just want to remind you, this is just for information only. You're going to have a chance in your small groups to really dive into these data and to make some really common reflections about what these data actually mean. So Dr. Grenz.
Thank you, Dr. Rubenstein. So as Dr. Rubenstein mentioned, I'm going to do my best to present the data as information only. You will absolutely have significant time here in a minute to engage with it. And a lot of this data will be public again tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So the first data set we have for you is the composite 4-, 5-, and 6-year graduation rate. As you can see there on the slide, this data will account for 50% of the summative designation for York High School this year. According to the United States Department of Education, student graduation from high school is an important indicator of school success and one of the most significant indicators of student college and career readiness. This measure, as Dr. Rubenstein pointed out, also aligns to our D205 vision of students being ready for college, career, and life. The years listed on the bottom there, where you see along the horizontal, include all students who graduated that year in either their 4th, 5th, or 6th year. So for example, if you look at year 2022 and the rate of 93.19%, that includes the 4-year graduation rate for students who entered York in 2019, the 5-year graduation rate for students who entered in 2018, and the 6-year for students who entered in 2017. Why is this important? Well, there are multiple factors that go into when a student is graduating. For example, at York High School this year, we have a higher number of students who are attending and participating with our transition center. So those students' graduation rates will appear in the 5- or 6-year graduation rates over the next year and the year after. In order to graduate ready for college, career, and life here in D205, the strategic plan, as you know, has a priority of student success, and one of those metrics will absolutely be graduation rate. Freshmen on track is a key predictor of high school success, and York High School continues to successfully focus on supporting our 9th grade students. For context, a student who is identified as on track has earned at least 5 full-year course credits, which is 10 semester credits, and has earned no more than 1 semester of an F in a core course. That's English, math, science, or social studies. Students who finish the 9th grade year on track are almost 4 times as likely to graduate from high school as students who are not on track. Research shows that the number of students on track and the graduation rate have a direct correlation, so that when schools actively intervene by identifying freshmen at risk, providing things like tutoring, additional instruction, and other individualized services, it impacts both of those achievement levels. These actions are just some of what York High School has been engaging with intentionality, which has led to, as you can see, a year-over-year increase on this metric since 2019, with the last year showing a 97.37% of our 9th grade students on track. That's a good thing. This next slide shows the SAT scores on the percentage of students who met the benchmarks of a 480 in the area of evidence-based reading and writing, and 530 in mathematics. These benchmarks are not set by us. They are set by College Board as an organization. As you know, the SAT is administered in 11th grade. It's often used by colleges and universities as an admissions metric as well. Students with a score that meets or exceeds the benchmark have a 75% chance of earning at least a C in the first semester of that credit-bearing college course. So for example, in the area of mathematics, courses like algebra, stats, pre-calc, and the areas of evidence-based reading and writing, courses like history, literature, etc. This data has been analyzed by the district and school leaders as we work to align our curriculum resources, our instruction, and our assessments to meet the rigor of the SAT exam. For an example, we are leveraging the expertise of our content specialists, our division leaders. These leaders, along with the building leaders at York, are participating in SAT-related learning to deepen their understanding of the SAT exam, to then be able to better support our teachers. As we know, our teachers are working tirelessly every day, and we feel this support will enhance their daily practices. Some of the action items that are already taking place and incorporating the SAT metric include actual written inclusion in the high school work plan for the first time ever, with SAT as a focus area. This will ensure that all department areas have a focus on increasing that percentage of students who meet the benchmarks. And also, as you will recall, with the support of you as a board, we had the addition of Kaplan this year with SAT Prep. We have over 300 students currently enrolled, and we've targeted students within that exact participation number based on their PSAT results. While we maintain approximately a 20% threshold compared to the state, we know that we can continuously improve our achievement as it relates to the SAT, which is why this absolutely continues to be an area of focus. Going down a few grades, the Illinois Assessment of Readiness is a federally required measure of our students' mastery on the Illinois Learning Standards in both ELA and math. It's administered in grades 3 through 8. As a reminder, the results from the IAR are used to measure student growth for us as a district and schools for their accountability. The IAR has proficiency levels in 5 different ranges. Level 5 is exceeded expectations. Level 4 is met. A level 3 is approached. A level 2 is partially met, and a level 1 is did not meet yet. This slideshow shows longitudinal data for our students in grades 3 to 8 on the IAR. You will see in this slide upward trajectory on the results from the spring of 2022 on the far right. We are absolutely excited and thankful for the collective hard work of everyone involved that has led to this upward trajectory. This slide shows progress. Yet, that said, we are focused on continuous improvement, and the elements of the IAR appear in every school improvement plan for each elementary school and each middle school. And that focus will continue as we work to ensure that this level of improved achievement continues year after year in D205. It's hard not asking questions, isn't it? It's all right, we're almost there. Advanced placement at York High School. We currently have approximately 28 AP course offerings. We have shifted to providing AP for students at their freshman year, which means they have more early college exposure, and those rigorous opportunities provide our students for more college preparation early on. In this slide, you will see the percentage of students receiving a 3, 4, or 5, meaning those students have passed the AP exam. This percentage has increased since 2021 by 4%. To help paint a picture, we have also included the national median trend line to help articulate a comparison, and you may see similarities as it relates to that data over the last several years. If you recall, we've also partnered with Equal Opportunity Schools to help identify those students who would not otherwise enroll in an AP course. What you don't see in this slide is that partnership has increased the number of targeted 11th and 12th grade students who are enrolling in AP courses this year from 34% to 45%. This slide shows the percentage of students who have taken a college level course while at York High School. This includes advanced placement. It also includes the Advanced College Project, also known as ACP, as well as dual credit that we partner with through the College of DuPage. Dual credit, just as a reminder, occurs during the school day. It allows students to earn high school and college credit at the same time, and it's taught by high school teachers who are approved as faculty at COD. The Advanced College Project is our partnership with the Indiana University. We currently offer courses in English, I believe 3 in math, 6 in world language, and 2 in the humanities. With the COD, we have partnered and have approximately 10 course offerings, and we're looking to continue to expand that next year as well. For the class of 2022, you will see an increase to 82% of students who have experienced a college level course by the end of their student journey here in D205. Looking at this data for students enrolling in college within 1 year, we receive this from the National Clearinghouse, which then populates in our own system known as Naviance. As you can see, while the trend at the state level has declined some over the past years, our data has remained relatively constant, with 85% of students enrolling in college within 1 year for the class of 2020. This is the most recent class of data that we have available at this time, and we are looking forward to continuously updating this and providing the community and the board with updates on that data. I will hand it to Dr. Rubenstein, who will talk about the next steps.
So as I talked about, it is a really exciting process to put this all together. And Dr. Grenz just shared with you the sort of raw data and the raw scores there. So let's talk about how it's put together. So the second step here is that each school and each score is then compared to the Illinois ESSA plan. So they are literally, they take the individual score and they compare it to how close we were to the score from the state and where those goals are. They do that for every demographic group, every single school year, and they are looking for improvement over time. So that's the second step there. The third step is that all schools and demographic groups are given a score. So there's one score for every school across the state in Illinois based on each of those indicators. Every demographic group with 20 or more students in a school is also given a score. And so, for example, you can see those demographic and program groups. If a school has a group of 20 or more Asian students at a school, then that group of Asian students is given an indicator score for that school. So if there are 20 or more children with disabilities at York High School, there is also an indicator score for children with disabilities at York High School, as an example, because there are. And there are 20 or more students from English learner backgrounds at York High School and at many of our schools. Those are just a few examples there. So that's step 3 in the process. Then they literally take, all the high schools, they put them in one group and they sort the scores from top to bottom. They take the elementary schools and middle schools, they put them in the other group. They sort them from top to bottom and they rank order them. And the top 10% of schools are designated as exemplary. The next group of schools are ranked as commendable, and you can see where they go on from there. So exemplary and commendable are the two categories that we are looking for there. The lowest category there is comprehensive support. Those are a group of schools that are in the bottom 5% of the state or have a graduation rate of below 67%. That's just a little bit of an indication about how the designations are given. So our summative designations in District 205, we are really pleased and excited to announce. These will be formally announced tomorrow out loud for the first time this year, that we have several schools who received commendable designations. And again, these are schools with no underperforming demographic groups. They are not in the top 10% of the state, but those schools are York Community High School, Churchville Middle School, Sandburg Middle School, Edison Elementary School, Fisher Elementary School, and Jackson Elementary School. And that leaves the remainder of our schools as exemplary schools. We have 6 of them this year. Schools in the top 10% of all schools in the state with no underperforming subgroups. That is Bryan Middle School, Emerson Elementary School, Field Elementary School, Hawthorne Elementary School, Jefferson Elementary School, and Lincoln Elementary School. And that is certainly something to be celebrated.
Can we pause and just clap for a moment and celebrate? I think I just want to mention that the last time in the previous slide that was shared, the last time that school designations were provided was in 2019. And at that time, we had 2 exemplary schools and the remainder of commendable schools. And this, I think, is just a pause to celebrate. However, we're not pleased in that there is still more work to be done. But we do want to pause and celebrate the work that has been done, that has allowed us to now have 6 exemplary schools.
That is exactly it. Very exciting, something to celebrate in every school, and you'll see exactly what that is to celebrate, what we're celebrating in every school in just a moment as you dig into the data. So we're going to take a closer look at 2 schools here just up on the screen. In what we have put together for you this evening. So this is a sort of a heat map of the scores overall for York Community High School. So you can see graphically that 50% of their score is the graduation rate. Their graduation rate, as Scott already as Dr. Grenz already shared, was at 93.19%, and that met the target from the state. So they got the full amount of points. So anything in the dark blue there that you see are areas where York Community High School got the full amount of points. So they actually got the full amount of points in for graduation rate, math proficiency, ELA proficiency, and science proficiency. So the ELA proficiency and math proficiency are the measures from the SAT. So those are comparisons to the state. The science proficiency for this year only is a participation rate because of the fact that they had to, typically it is a growth rate, but it is a comparison typically from how students grow from 8th grade to 11th grade, but they didn't have scores to compare it to. So that is that first part there. As you are looking at some of the next lighter blue, the 9th graders on track. York High School didn't quite get all of their points, but they were close at 90% or above in terms of the proficiency in getting all of their points for 9th grade on track. And so you can see up there in the lighter blue. The couple areas where we need to focus for York as a school are in the chronic absenteeism. Their rate was higher than had been expected. So actually getting students to school and making sure that they are in school every single day. The percentage of students who are absent, and chronic absenteeism is actually a measure of the number of students who are absent from school 10% or more of the school days, and that is excused or unexcused, and that excludes students who are in hospital placements. And so a higher number than it had been expected. And so they didn't quite get all of their points there. So that's the first area where they would really need to focus on. And then EL progress to proficiency. It's a really complicated measure, but basically what we are looking for there is that when a student comes into our district, that they are making progress and towards meeting the goal of exiting our EL services, our English learner services, within 5 years. And so if a student enters English learner services at a certain grade, we want to make sure that they are exiting within that 5-year period. And this is an individual measure. And so what it looks like from this graph is that we need to focus a little bit more on making sure that our EL services and our EL students have the supports and services that they need there. And then that last area there is the climate survey. Again, this is a participation rate, and we need to make sure that all of our students are actually participating in the climate survey at all of our schools, but especially at York High School. As we move on to Emerson Elementary School, you can see that they don't have graduation rate included, and they're also missing EL progress to proficiency. So their ELA growth and their math growth is a little bit overweighted. And so, but they are in the green for both of those areas. They got between 80 and 90% of their overall points in each of those areas. And so that was a really strong score for them. They got all of their points for ELA proficiency, math proficiency, and science proficiency. And actually, as we were digging into these data with our principals and assistant principals and other school leaders, Emerson actually did really quite well related to ELA proficiency. So the table that gets to dig into Emerson's data, you'll get to see that in a little bit. They also had really strong scores related to chronic absenteeism and their climate survey. So what we would do with a school like Emerson is that we would dig into some of their demographic groups. And that is exactly what we have done to attempt to say, all right, so who are the students in the school, or what demographic groups that are not growing right now, or not growing as quickly? Who's holding us, who's not meeting a benchmark? Who did not meet the benchmark this last year? When we're looking at our chronic absenteeism, which students aren't coming to school? How do all of these relate? And so to try to tie all of that together there. So we really try to dig into these data with all of our school leaders to make some sense of them. And so that as we are doing some school improvement planning, that all of that comes together in a really solid way. And so what Dr. Grenz is going to take us through is a very brief walkthrough of this school improvement planning process, which we have been on really since the later part of this last school year.
Thank you. So we wanted to give a snapshot of what this work looks like within the schools as it relates to some of the work, not only at the school improvement level, but also at the district level as it relates to the alignment and support of schools. So DataWise is a text that was used in the district years and years ago, and we've recently resurfaced it as a resource because it really did support and meet a lot of the needs that we had as it related to a cycle for us with our school improvement planning. So that first step you'll see has to do with organizing for collaborative work. I'm very proud, and I've talked to you about it on September 27th regarding the Learning Together plan that we have developed for the remainder of the year with over 95 district-led adult learning opportunities. That's just the district side of the adult learning and the data use. There is a whole nother set of collaborative group structures that takes place at the school level. Everything from PLCs, school leadership teams, BLTs, as well as SIP teams that develop our plans and our goals at the school level. So we have organized for collaborative work. We started that in the spring. We did it all throughout last year as well, but this actual process we started to narrow in more in the spring. The next step you'll see is building data literacy. So teams have reflected on goals that were set last year and we've narrowed the focus even more as it relates to the metrics that we're using and the progress that we're monitoring around goals that are set throughout the district. We've also, when we meet and engage, have asked school leaders to bring in data that they have at their own sites that they may want to add to the data puzzle or look into as it relates to our shared data literacy to help correlate and see why things are happening and where there may be opportunities for celebration and then also for improvement. The third step relates to creating a data overview. We've developed a series of priority questions. These prompts have served in the school improvement planning process. They've also allowed us to create very healthy and thick data decks to support our schools and our leaders as they engage in the work for themselves, but then as they also then bring that work into their school sites to support the teachers and really getting the work of our students into the classroom to help make sure we're making data-informed decisions. That fourth step is similar to what you will be doing tonight. In fact, the actual activity that you're going to go through is something our school leaders also engaged with as well. We do this regularly, in which we dig into data. And again, what we're trying to do at the district level is provide protocols and helpful resources that then can be brought back to school sites and adapted and modeled and used for the schools with the teachers to provide that support as well. The fifth step is examining our own practice. So data is comprehensive, and there are other different and variety of data sets that may exist. So things like classroom observations, learning walks, these are all data points that we've started to also focus on and bring into the picture as it relates to monitoring and celebrating success for students, as well as achieving goals that are set. That sixth step, developing an action plan. We've become more and more intentional. As I mentioned a minute ago, the focus has increased on less metrics, but more important metrics, as we feel that we want to increase that alignment between things such as school improvement plans, principal goals, teacher goals, and even student goals. The seventh step, planning to assess progress. We review goals on a regular basis, as well as various assessments. As we've talked last week, the MAP assessment we now administer 3 times a year, but that is just one snapshot. There are also things such as common unit assessments, formative assessments that take place on a more regular basis to help us and help our teachers know where our students are at and where they need to be supported. And even our own SIP process, our school improvement plan itself, has a status section that allows for leaders and school teams to put in an organic format where they're at and monitoring and meeting their goals along the way. The last step is acting and assessing. So as we mentioned, the collaborative structures that were mentioned in the organization in the top have allowed for more conversations around shifting practice and increased dialogue that helps leaders become more and more reflective. We have an amazing, strong group of principals and assistant principals. We've been able to leverage their talents in those sessions to help present and co-share what is working and what are some things that leaders in the district can learn from one another and then incorporate possibly into either their school improvement planning process or goals in other areas of the school. All right. We're going to turn it back over to Dr. Campbell, but I do believe you get a break.
Well, actually, it was planned, but I just want to take a temperature check. I think, do we need a stretch break or can we keep going through? Just wanted to. You like one, but not now? So we're ready to keep going? Yeah? Okay. Great. So as Dr. First, I want to just thank my colleagues for sharing and walking us through that process and looking at how summative designations are provided, as well as the various metrics that relate to those designations within our district. So as shared, I know there were some questions that might have came up when we walked through some of those data sets. But what we want to do is we want to look specifically and kind of dive a little bit deeper at our high school, at a particular middle school, and then the feeder schools. I want to say that in this particular committee of the whole meeting, we are utilizing a protocol. And the whole idea of this protocol is just to allow us to really, in a very structured manner, walk through a series of steps so that we're able to look at the information a little bit more closely. But then from a board perspective, we're going to end with a whole board open conversation and reflection and discussion. So I want you all to not be too nervous about being so strict with just talking within your table groups. We're going to do that through steps 1, 2, and 3. But I promise you, at the end, we're going to be able to come back together and kind of share some of those takeaways from a board governance standpoint, okay? And so with this, I just want to preference that there's going to be some time commitments, okay? So in each of our phases, I don't want you to be too alarmed, but there will be a time clock that will actually be displayed on the screen. Is that correct, Mr. Gomez? And we're going to spend some time within those table groups discussing, and then the last 5 minutes, we will then come back together and have each of those tables to share out for the purpose of ensuring that our community and those that are joining us online during our share outs, I'm going to kindly ask you to make sure your microphone is on and you're speaking into that microphone so that those reflections can be heard by all that are interested. I want to just first orientate you to where you're going to actually jot down your notes and your reflections. So if you look on page 4, table 1, team, you should see a document that has some writing at the top, but then actually has some a grid and a columns for you to jot down your notes, and it's labeled Table 1 Discussion Guide. So just for a check of understanding, can you give me a thumbs up if you have your table in front of you? Thank you. I'm still waiting on a few. Thumbs up. Do you have your table in front of you? Yes. Okay. All right, great. So we're going to go, you can move on to the next slide. We're going to start with our phase 1. And as shared, this is an adapted Atlas protocol, data review protocol, very similar to what many of our administrators and team leaders engage in. And so this is great that the board will have this opportunity to engage in this. So phase 1, the goal of this phase is for the group really just to gather as much information as possible from the data, describing what you see. And so in this particular phase, we are trying to avoid judgments, interpretations. It is explicitly just what you see in the data, okay? We're clear with that? Okay, so we're going to go with our time. We're going to have, you should have in your folder also a data set. So we actually call it, the administrators, we call it the donuts. So you should have a donut for our high school. You should have a donut for our middle school. So we have Sandburg represented by a table group, Bryan represented by a table group, as well as Churchville. And so you should have your middle school, and then you will have the elementary feeder schools also in your folder. Okay, so just want to make sure that I know there's a lot of paperwork. So you should have your donuts as well as then your graph to jot down your reflections, your notes. This first phase is strictly just describing what you see. What do you see and what is observed in the data, okay? 15 minutes has started, and so you all may begin.
So I have to seal it like tomorrow. Yeah. So I was like, see, I'm getting stuff done. Yeah, stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, what? Oh, it's like went crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, team, we're going to come back together. At each individual group, there is what we call a table mat that has identified a board member to share out the key elements, the key points that were discussed. And so once again, I'm going to ask that whoever is responsible for speaking out, please bring your microphone close and turn that on. We're going to just have 5 minutes. So I'm going to ask Mr. Gomez if you can just, even on a phone, give us you can just do it on a phone, 5 minutes to share out the discussions that were had at each table. Do I have a volunteer to go for? Okay. Board Member Arvanites. Thank you.
Sure. Is it 5 minutes total or each table or?
No. It's
total?
5
Okay.
minutes total.
I'm just
so
making sure. Well, then it's great that we started with us
Yeah.
because we have. Well, now I'll pizzazz you with my speech. We actually, in very short 2-3 sentences, were able to summarize some of the continuity or consistency that we see among the scores that we had, or the schools that we had: York, Churchville, Emerson, and Fisher. And it really comes down to all 4 schools having this area of chronic absenteeism, and as a place where we did not, hit the mark. And then also that student growth in a couple areas, Math ELA, is the focus. But the celebration for these schools is really that proficiency, that we are meeting the targets when it comes to proficiency, and that where we can maybe tweak a little and focus some resources and energy would be in individual student growth in ELA and math.
Excellent. Thank you. So well concise, and I appreciate how you were able to bring in some of the trends across your cohort of schools that you looked at. Wonderful. Do I have a group that's ready to go?
Yeah, we're ready.
Okay.
So we had York, Bryan, Jackson, Jefferson, and Lincoln, much similar to our the group ahead of us. Chronic absenteeism is something that we felt needs to be a focus across the board. We also found growth to be a critical issue, though proficiencies are being met strongly. Somehow in our middle school and elementary school, growth is lacking. We also want EL to be a focus because we're not seeing that the way we want to see it at York. And the climate surveys. I mean, simple, what did Karen, low-hanging fruit. This is something that can be fixed very quickly, and participation should be higher, non-negotiable. And the math growth needs to be focused on, and in some elementary schools, it's below 70%. And so that goes back to kind of our growth. And we're also happy to see that that graduation rate is a substantial contributor to our scores for York. And we want to make sure that's continued to be focused on.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate you describing what you saw in the data across. You did throw in a few of those interpretations and some of those trends, but we appreciate your attentiveness, as well as some opportunities in which how we can respond to the data as well was thrown in there. But I do appreciate that. Last but certainly not least.
All right, so we had York, Sandburg, Hawthorne, Field, and Edison. We, like other groups have mentioned, it's notable that all schools hit their proficiency target in science, math, and English language arts, which we think is that's excellent. But it was the growth targets at some of our schools that really hurt the overall outcomes, and particularly in math. That seemed to be where the growth struggled the most. Chronic absenteeism, as other groups have mentioned, particularly York and Sandburg had the greatest amount, but not one of the schools hit their target. And that is notable, and I think I am surprised by that. That is a piece of data that I am surprised at, and I think, will be part of our further discussions. And obviously, like everyone's mentioned, the EL at York will need our attention. So, all right.
Excellent, thank you. So you all just successfully completed phase 1. Awesome job. And so now we're going to move on to phase 2. And at this time, now we can get into, which I heard a little bit of that in our conversations. And I know board member Athena, she has some items already written down in that interpretation column, as well as has already been shared by board member Troutman. So here in our phase 2, it now we're able to lean in a little bit more to the interpretation of the data. So this is where we're able to now bring in, what does this data suggest, and what are some of the assumptions, right, that we can begin making about particular our schools and students and learning. And again, I really appreciate how in all of your reflections, you're looking at the cohort. So it's about the trends and the things that you are seeing across the cohort of schools that you're looking at, the feeder elementaries to the middle school and as well as the high school. So we have 15 minutes on the clock. And we're now able to dive into the guiding question, what does this data suggest? concludes our phase 2 of interpretation. There was just a lot of colorful and really engaging conversation. So thank you so very much. We're going to actually start in reverse and have our table up front. I see they're doing a drum roll and for Mr. Collins. Okay.
Oh boy, it's your own peril. So some of our interpretations, I'm just going to merge the interpretations, wonderings, and questions all together. So based upon the data, our kids are proficient. Are we taking advantage, but they're not growing according to the state. So our question is, are we providing them with enough rigorous opportunities to learn and grow? Another question we have is this chronic absenteeism rate. Why aren't our kids coming to school? I think the next question you have to ask is the kids that aren't coming to school, does that affect their academic performance? And I think the answer for some will be yes and others no. Let's focus on the kids where the answer is yes. Now, the other question that I particularly have is, why is participation in the climate survey given the same weight by the state of Illinois in middle school as proficiency in science? And at York, it's actually more important than science proficiency.
That's a wonderful wondering and question for the state. Yeah.
So another question I have is, why do we benchmark to the state average? Sorry, I got to read my own writing here, and sometimes that's very difficult. Another question that I have is proficiency in these categories. How does that proficiency correlate to student success in college? So how relevant is this? Another question that we at the table have is, particularly at York, are we encouraging students to take challenging courses? Are we counseling them to do so? Another question we at the table had was, are some of the answers to our questions found in that student climate survey, in their answers? We should take a look at that. And then the team also asks, how can we increase the student survey, the participation of the student climate survey participation? Sorry. My personal question is, will participation in the student climate survey improve student outcomes? And that's all I got.
Excellent. Thank you. Some really, really great, thoughtful questions there. We're 3 minutes, so the next two tables are going to have to share that 3 minutes. We're going to go to the back.
Okay, so I'm going to start first. We were suggesting that can the climate surveys be administered in the classroom? So maybe it's a low-hanging fruit to get the climate survey numbers up. And the math growth, what did we say here? Data says we should accelerate in our math growth. And we said an increase in the math and ELA would have a positive impact across the board. Chronic absenteeism could impact the other categories, growth and proficiency. And so we need more information to analyze that. At York, is there a tie between chronic absenteeism and the EL progress? So it's like, okay, anyway, we won't go into the details that we talked about. How close is York to exemplary? It looks like, based on the detailed data, that we're close, but curious question. What can we do to target ninth grade on track? So we're really close again on ninth grade on track. So Is it something like continuing or enhancing the relationship between the middle schools and the high school so that the ninth graders are prepared for that high school experience? And so we can get that ninth grade a little bit higher since it's close. So for the chronic absenteeism, I probably should have put these together, but anyway, is there a tie to COVID and parents having a different philosophy about kids going to school? And so they're more lenient to have the kids stay home. And then what do we do to follow up with the students that are out of class and to make up for that work? What does the data tell us about math? And for Brian, science appears to be a low-hanging fruit, so what can we do there? Again, it's close to being proficient, and we want to make sure that, you know, math, English, science are core curriculum, and so what can we do to push it up?
Excellent, thank you. And then I'm going to turn it over to our third group.
Okay, I'm quick.
That was,
Okay, this came up a little bit already, but how does chronic absenteeism, what's the correlation between that and the lack of growth in various areas? And then we'd like to look at that more closely and see, to reestablish the importance of being in school and how that affects your grades and growth. And then what are the causes, the root causes of that absenteeism? And are there ways that we can support families? They might be different groups that need to be supported in different ways, but are there ways that we can encourage kids being in school and help families through that? And then with the EL progress, we were noticing that the numbers went down a little bit from the younger to the older grades, and we were just wondering, we thought it would be a good idea to look at how long those students have been with us. Like, are we talking about students who just came into the district in middle school or in high school, or have they been with us since kindergarten, and how that might differ? And then I think those were everything else has been covered by other groups. So.
Excellent, thank you. And I heard a colleague say that was a really, really great question. I think there was some conversation across all of those tables that really want us to look at, and maybe there's some opportunity to dig a little bit more in that data as we see our students progress through our district. So now we're going to go to our third and final phase. We are almost on home stretch. I want to pause and just do a temperature check. Do we need a break? Are you all okay with going through this phrase? We need a break? Okay, great. So let's take a 5-minute break. now going to go into our, as previously I mentioned before, our break phase 3, which is our final phase. And this is where we're able to really be able to share what actually did we learn. What did we learn from the data today, as well as from some of the collective reflections and questions that were asked? As we've noted, there were certain items that were trends and spoken and discussed across all of the tables, but I think in how they were reported out and certain questions that led into. And so we're really going to just take, this is going to be a little bit more abbreviated. We're going to take 10 minutes for us to consider what possible new perspectives did this data and this input from colleagues provide. What are some of the questions about D205 that we now have after looking at this data for you? And are there things you would like to be considered in the future as a result of looking at this data? And many of those items have already been shared publicly as you've shared out. So we're going to take about 10 minutes and then we'll report out, and then we will turn it over to our board president for there to be a collective conversation that board members can have. Okay, 10 minutes. Once again, thank you so very much for engaging in that. I know that that time was a little bit less than the previous phases. We're going to start right back in the middle at Board Member Stufen and Board Member Troutman's table. Again, you're sharing out some of the just broader trends and themes, again, that we might have learned from this data and the collective input from one another.
Sorry. My notes were taken away from me, so I'm just going
Brittany's turn.
to start right now.
Okay.
So I think what we learned from the data and talking together is, I think our theme here is Karen's term. I call it the domino effect, reverse engineering. Yep. So we want to see what happens at our elementary schools. It's going to impact our middle schools, going to impact our high school. Even within York, the absenteeism and not being in the classroom is going to affect our proficiency, which is going to impact our growth, right? Like it's a domino effect. And that is, I think, our major concern here, how that impact at the first step, whether it's elementary level or absenteeism, then impacts everything in our success journey along the way. So I'm gonna read Tanya's writing. So am I up here? Getting students in school regularly, right? It's a domino impact, right? Like I said, sorry. We want the numbers to increase, but we also don't want to lose focus on the individual student, right? The fact that, our numbers are increasing, we cannot lose focus on every single student and the story that they're living, not just their successes, but how we can help them to succeed more. So what is their story? Because their story impacts how they succeed. We can't wait for multiple years to impact change. We need change to happen now. I mean, we lose kids. Middle school's 3 years. We can't wait for a 3-4 year cycle for something to kick in. We need to see, direct change, impactful change soon. We need to prepare, this goes back to the 8th and 9th grade, preparing students for the enormity of high school. Are we giving them all the support systems they need to succeed right from the get-go? Because their success in 9th grade is going to impact us and them for the entire 4 years. I think I'm gonna go. Is that good? Okay, all right. Passing it on.
Excellent.
Passing on the baton.
I'm gonna actually go right up here to shaking it up.
All right. So I think, particularly we talked quite a bit about York and the absentee, but engaging with the students and families the students that are chronically absent, and engaging with both them and their families, so that there's an understanding of the path that, being in school and what York has to offer can do for both the student and also for the family, and what supports possibly might help them overcome the chronic absenteeism. And then it seemed like there could maybe be a district-wide common time for the climate survey to just ensure that all students are taking it. So that was just something to be considered. And then growth, since, it's still excellent that we're hitting our proficiency targets, but growth is so important. So how is the growth being prioritized for our staff to really engage with what is the growth that needs to be achieved for our students? And is that happening like in PLCs or, institute days, or how is that nurtured for our staff? Because it's more than just the proficiency. So I think I hit it all. Did I hit everything? Did I get anything? Okay. All right.
Excellent. Thank you so very much. Our last group.
Thanks, Keisha. And so this is a nice process. Thanks for having us go through it. I think it really kind of formulated the essential questions that need to be focused on by the board in order to think through what some of these things look like for our schools, for our kids, and some of those implications longer term. But what it really provided was this avenue for kind of identifying some focus and priorities, I think, for you and your team to focus on district-wide, but also at each level of school and school building that we have. I'll take it one step further, and what I like about the new way that ISBE kind of rolled out their proficiency and growth system of how they rate schools, that this approach is helping us, or helping all students grow, where it feels like in the past we focused on certain groups of students and their growth in the last, I'll even go back as 5 years or maybe more, but now we're focusing on all students. And the conversations, what we learned and what we talked about at our table is that those conversations now are becoming about individual students. What do they need? What is going on with them in their learning, maybe in their lives? And how do we as a school provide that support for them? So overall, that was the feeling of our table. You know, and I want to just highlight that going back to, we learned, you know, the need that we have this need to look deeper, and by we, I mean the administration, the team, your team, you know, there's this need to look deeper and to focus on and prioritize EL, academic growth in core subject areas, and then chronic absenteeism as mentioned by other tables. And it feels like the solutions for the climate survey participation are pretty easy. Like we can figure that out without a lot of resources or energy to be used. But overall, there was a feeling that we're in a good place, that this is a good problem to have right now, that of course, schools are constantly in a continuous improvement model, and that students and their path is being supported by caring people who really want to see them succeed. And ultimately, you know, is there room to improve? Of course. Are we in dire straits? Absolutely not. Are our kids having good experiences today? Yes. And there's even more to come for them, which we felt was really strong coming through and through this process. So thank you.
Thank you. I just want to pause and just say thank you so very much to all of our board team as well as our administrators for engaging in this process. One of the other things I just want to underscore and highlight everything that has already been shared, but I hope through this process we can also see how data creates more opportunities to ask more questions. And so sometimes that when we see data and we put various information up, we might have the propensity to quickly jump to the assumptions and then quickly jump to actual ways in which we want to respond without quickly seeing and understanding the correlation, as well as we kind of sometimes refer to peeling the onion and get at the root cause. I think we saw that in some of the discussion as it relates to chronic absenteeism, and one of my board member colleagues mentioned, right, let's really look and understand who are the students, and let's engage in conversations with them and their families to also then triangulate that with various assessments and student achievement data points to then see what those implications are. And so oftentimes I just want to affirm that when we look at data, we should sometimes feel like we're leaving with more questions than we have answers. And that's part of the process of continuous improvement and why we have these cycles. And this is just a snippet of what school teams and school administrators are doing on a daily basis. So as was echoed and mentioned last week, as well as we underscore this week from my colleagues that have shared, this is the work that we are constantly engaging in. And we're constantly looking for ways of how we're going to elevate the academic achievement for every individual student that walk through our doors throughout the entire district. Starting as early as our mini Dukes in Madison, all the way through high school at York, as well as our transition center. So again, thank you so very much for this process, for attending and really actively engaging in this process. What I'm going to now do is we're going to go to the next slide, if we could. And I'm going to, there we go, thank you. I'm going to actually turn it over to President Cafario to just lead the board through the final activity for this evening. Thank you.
All right, so what are the implications of this work for board governance in District 205 as we think about the strategic plan, budget, goals, policy, staffing? So in your packet, you have a sheet that has the strategic plan and, you know, in a couple weeks or whatever our coming meeting is, we're going to talk about the metrics that go with these. But as we look at these, you know, we obviously always are mindful of the budget and thinking about our policy and staffing. Take a minute and just think about how what we've seen tonight, which I know for me personally, there were some things that I'm surprised by. You know, what are actions we can take, or what are things we'd like to see in future conversations to consider? So I'm going to just give you a couple minutes to make a couple notes, and then everybody can sort of weigh in. Not by group. Now you're on your own. All right. Okay, so I'm going to, you know, I think we will, you know, I don't think we have to go through each of these questions, but I think the question is, what do we need to really consider, prioritize? What other questions do we have as we move forward? And, you know, things we'd like considered. So I don't know if somebody wants to go first. Karen?
I'd like to start by saying that this data is really critical for us as a board to understand. To receive this data is really critical for us to link the decisions and the things that you, recommendations that you bring to us, how they fit into our students directly. So this is always the important thing for me, because that's what I'm always asking when you recommend something to the board, like, where are you thinking about it matters to the students? And it is meaningful, not just verbiage. Because if we can talk about our recommendations from here's where we are, here's where we're moving to, and this is where it plays a part, there's a linkage that we all are on the same page, and then it makes sense. So that to me that's this work, why it's important from a board standpoint. So thank you for that. I'm going to echo what this table said is we've traditionally overperformed from a state and a national level, So, I liked having the trends where our data is and where we are in the state and how it compares. Because the question typically is that we've traditionally been a lot higher. And so, where are we with respect to that these days? And with what you are asking us to allocate resources toward, where's it going to get us to? Okay, so we're all thinking about it from that standpoint. And again, I want to clarify that I'm talking about data and I'm talking about, like bigger picture, but action and getting to the end goal, which is the numbers. But in the process, it's always about all of our students. That's the most important. But we can say we're for all of our students, but not move the needle. So, as a board, we think about those things, right? So I will stop at that point because those are like bigger picture, that to me is critical and why this is important and why it's nice to get it because it's been a while. It's nice to work with this new group with it too.
Great. Beth?
Yeah, I think that as we look at student success in our strategic objectives, and especially aligning curricular resources, programs, and instructional practices to research standards and data, this information gives us the opportunity, and our administration and staff, the opportunity to really do that. And I would like to see us really look into this data and find out if there are things as a board that we can help for support to make sure that our students have the tools that they need to be successful and grow. So Courtney brought up study skills and to have the tools and supports in place that students need to be successful and to make sure they're on track. Different things, procedures and policies, homework, and our grading systems, and just looking into some of those things. I think this gives us an opportunity to, survey some of our students and families and get more information about those procedural things that hopefully we as a board can help to support and recommend. And then another thing, we talked about the survey in the climate survey and trying to improve the number of students taking it. I also would like to see how we can use that information. It's one thing to take the survey, it's another thing to take the information we get from that survey and really apply it and use it to make improvements. So I would love to hear more about that. And then the community outreach and engagement piece, I think that is a great opportunity. This is a great opportunity for us to find out where we can focus our community engagement. How can we support families and parents and students in these areas that we've been talking about? And I think that's really important. And I think through surveys and delving into this data, we can figure out exactly what would be most effective rather than just choosing things. Thank you.
Courtney.
First, I'm gonna ask Chris.
I was going to say, do you want to ask?
Do you want to, nothing? Okay. I have him on mute, so I actually have control of what he says and doesn't say. So Karen Beth and I, Karen Beth and I were finishing up our 4th year. And I will just say, this is the first time in the 4 years that I have been here that we have had a data-driven discussion. That is I've been thinking about that all night, and it is overwhelming to me, and it makes me happy for the impact that we are having right now in the last year for our kids. I'm overwhelmed by it, and but I just want our community to know that this is a huge thing. Like this, 4 years, 3.5, but first time. And I feel like our role as this board is to set the goals and the priorities, which we have clearly done. Give you, Dr. Campbell, and our district and our building administrators the tools to accomplish those goals, support you along the way, and then hold you accountable for them. And that's our plan. You know, we have had this wonderful discussion here tonight, the best I feel like I've had since I've been on this board. And like, we're going to hold you accountable. And I know that you welcome that challenge. And I know that this administration and these building administrators and our teachers welcome that challenge. And I'm excited for you. I'm excited for you to show how much we can accomplish when we are all on that trajectory to success. And I echo Beth's comment that discussions like this, open forum, breaking it down, and the details of the data help our community understand everything that's going on and how not only are we looking at the data, but we're looking at every kid. And so thank you for all the work that went into this. And I am so excited to hear about the impactful decisions that are going to be made starting tomorrow, I'm sure. And everything that's going to help achieve student success moving forward.
Thanks. Jim. Ready? All right, Jim.
Sure. I just have a couple of observations. First, I find that organizations tend to gravitate toward the benchmark they choose, so we should choose our benchmark carefully. I also think it would be a good exercise for this Board of Education to question and challenge and maybe reorient some of the weightings that the state of Illinois has chosen for these categories in these donuts, as they were described to us. I think we really need to have a thoughtful discussion. If these represent our boards and our community's priorities for our children, we just need to ensure that these weightings and what we look at is right for our very own community.
I can.
Chris signed off.
Oh, all right. Sorry, I just always find myself formulating thoughts as we're all given 3 questions with 5 minutes to think about them. Anyway, sorry, I'm just joking. So a couple things. Strategic priorities, what kind of stood out to me a bit is that when I think about these 4 categories that were outlined by the strategic plan, I'm seeing the analysis of the work that was done tonight and by both the administrative team and the board team fit right into this strategic plan. So when we're talking about things like progress monitoring, I've heard that a few times from different board members, and that reporting to our level as we monitor student growth fits right into student success. Climate, culture, and supports for kids is another kind of big bucket we talked a lot about, and that is all about the learning environment and building a positive culture for students to thrive in. The resource allocation piece for the board, I think, is enormous. And so when we're talking about looking at data like this and identifying what kids need, I think, a good example of this is like EL, I think district-wide, right? Where we're seeing we're seeing room for improvement. And so the board understanding that may be a fiscal priority in resource allocation, right? So it starts to tie all these things together in a really comprehensive way for me. And then another example is the chronic absenteeism and how we use community outreach, another pillar of the strategic plan, and how that can be utilized to help support and demonstrate growth in that area too. So that's kind of the big picture that I see. A couple just thoughts I had around the data analysis, and we had this conversation at the table, how the data analysis starts at this high level and then it infiltrates down and it goes from this big kind of by district, by school, by grade level, all the way down to building and classroom and student, teacher and then student, right? And so I guess a wonder I have and something to consider is like, as we move through that continuous improvement model, how are we getting the bottom up? Like that top feels totally appropriate, right? And leads us in our strategic kind of big picture thinking as a board. But then how do we know what is happening in the schools? What do kids and teachers need? And how does that come back up to this level? I think is a place where I'd like to understand more. And really it's about, and a good example of this, if I can do this, because Beth and I were just at Edison, which was fantastic, by the way. And we went with the purpose of, we were shown what Foundations is like in the classroom, and that was a new ELA curriculum implemented by the district, which I got to tell you, to have teachers that skilled in a new curriculum, and it's only October, is fascinating. So kudos to the team for doing that. But the reason why I bring this up is that, you know, we're in that improvement model, that continuous improvement model, where now it might be, and I'm sure you're doing this, but just for the public to hear, time to get that feedback from students and teachers. What's working? What are we noticing? What are the patterns that are developing? And how do we continue to support one another? And how does that come back up and loop back around again in the model? And I say that because I felt like in that moment was so proud of what we've done and what we're doing to support kids. And then I think about our math growth and where we are there and what's going to be needed to have this same impact on students moving forward. EL was another one that came up. So these areas of focus start to become wrapped up pretty nicely for me in my own crazy head. I had one more thing. Oh, can I just make a plug because I have a microphone in my hand. And this is just about the school report card coming out tomorrow with the updated information. I encourage all of us, board members and community, to take a look at the report card, and not just our school and district and individual schools, but the state has done a nice job of being able to compare to other schools, to see where other schools may be in our state, so that we can have a better understanding of these ratings, what they mean, what percentages we might be shooting for. Jim, you mentioned benchmarks. You know, what should that number be? It really puts things into context when we're seeing what some of these, what some of our neighbors and counterparts are able or are doing, right? And then where we kind of rank accordingly. So I just wanted to put a plug out there. The data from this school year, from last school year, is going to be published tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., like Dr. Gren said, and I encourage anyone who's interested in school data to review all of it. It's very comprehensive. I've already done it. So anyway, from last year. And so, yes, just in closing, a really thoughtful approach to our kids and student learning, and excited about the individualization per student and school building that we'll be seeing here. So thank you for all your hard work. This is a very heavy lift. I understand that, and I just appreciate all that you're all doing. Thank you.
Okay. So I was just going to add that I think the data, really digging into the data, creates an urgency around certain growth areas in our district. And so you know, we've all mentioned the EL population, and but I think probably most of us, I know I'll speak for myself, but the absenteeism was a surprise, and so that's something that I'm going to expect that you guys dig into and come back to us and share your findings, and if there's a resource that's needed, then present that to us, and we'll be able, you know, to go back to the data and what we're trying to achieve. I also think that this speaks to, you know, we've heard this, and I think there was another data presentation that talked about, you know, kind of our progress, and, you know, kind of there was a little bit of a downward trajectory. And I think the rigor and the growth piece that emerge in this data, that it's not just about proficiency, right? And I think that you know, historically, you know, even from how the tests were, it's all been about proficiency. And so I guess the question is really, I mean, it's for you guys, but how will you really work with our principals and our teachers to really help develop that growth in students? Because we want, I mean, we've said it, we say it, we want growth for all students, right? And it looks different if you're a student with an IEP and a general education student, and you know, we want our top students to grow as well. We're always trying to move, you know, we looked at the map and you want more students meeting, you want more students exceeding, so growth for all. So I feel like the data really gives us that urgency, and these are the things that I would expect are coming back to us after you dig in a little more, and there's some action plans of how we're going to address the opportunities for growth. And I think I really want to note that there's a lot to celebrate tonight, and that did not happen by accident. That was intentional work by our leadership, both in this room under Dr. Campbell's leadership and our principals, to be intentional about, you know, the priority was set last year to improve growth in math and English language arts. And I would say that the data shows that you did that. And by having more schools exemplary, that is a example of great work, and also happy that our other schools were all commendable. So it's fantastic, and we know that we all know in this room that we want to see growth, you know, more growth, and we will continuous improvement, but there's a lot to celebrate, and I want to say thank you to all of you that help make that happen, and our principals and the teachers in our classrooms. So I think really now you come back to us with which I believe is planned for the school improvement plans, and we're going to talk about, dig in a little more on metrics and measurements and comparators in the next couple meetings. That was on the slide. So I think this is a good place to end. It's hard to believe that it's been 2.5 hours, and it's been really good. I learned, enjoyed discussing. What?
Just say, this has been my favorite meeting to date.
There you go. All right.
Yeah, I mean, really, having the conversation that we've all been wanting to have for a long time. Favorite meeting to date.
Yep. Long time coming. All right. So if there's nothing else, then I'm going to, does anyone have a board communication?
Remember that agenda?
Oh, Jen, I thought you were raising your hand. All right, so we have upcoming meetings, November 3rd, 2022, Finance and Operation Committee meeting at 5:30 here in District 205 Center, and November 15th, 2022, Board of Education meeting at 7 o'clock here in District 205 Center. We've come to the end of our agenda, so we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That was great.
Thank you.